So I've got a set of questions that hopefully will help inform people about some common misperceptions and myths with the answers. So we're going to rotate through the doctors. So Dr. Apolo, you're going to be up first. And let's start with the first one. So aren't clinical trials just for people who have run out of options?
No, absolutely not. We used to have basically most of the clinical trials were phase 1, first in human trials, and that's a lot of the work that we do at the NCI, and that's when we're testing new drugs. But once we see something is active, it moves from a phase 1 to phase 2, where we have an active dose, and then when we're really looking for efficacy. And then we have phase 3s, where we have really large trials, and we have a standard of care arm, and then we have the treatment arm. And the trials are not only in patients that don't have options, there's also trials for patients with the standard of care plus. So you get the standard of care plus an active agent versus the standard of care, or not even, it doesn't have to be versus the standard of care, depends if it's a phase 3 randomized trial or if it's a single arm trial. There's a lot of different types of trials. So it's not only for patients that have run out of options, it's for patients that are just getting standard of care. They can get standard of care plus in a novel agent.
One of the most common questions that I get about clinical trials is that, will I get a sham infusion or a sugar pill or no cancer treatment at all? And I will tell you that, my response to patients is that, the field of cancer research in the United States is heavily regulated, and it's overseen by institutional review boards that make sure that not only are we treating patients safely, but they're always receiving nothing less than the standard of care. And so in the only scenario where patients are receiving a placebo pill is where the standard of care could either be a standard treatment on its own plus a placebo, or in a scenario where best supportive care on its own would be a standard of care. So for instance, there are some trials where patients are randomized to receive the standard of care treatment with an experimental treatment, or they receive the standard of care treatment without any additional treatment, and sometimes that is replaced with a placebo pill so that we don't know if the patient is receiving the standard of care treatment plus the experimental treatment or the standard of care treatment on its own. That's occasionally done, but the most important thing is that when any clinical trial, this will be clearly disclosed. It will be in the informed consent documentation. Your physician who is reviewing the trial with you will have to clearly dispel this out for you. But occasionally we do it, but it's always in the context of receiving no less than the standard of care.
Okay, great. I'm going to skip the next question because I think we addressed it with the first two. So Dr. Apolo, can I select the treatment I prefer from the choices being tested in the trial?
So if it's a randomized trial, the answer is no. You get randomized, and that's literally a random process done by a computer. But you can also select the trials. If you select a single agent trial that only has one agent or one arm of a combination being tested, you can select the trial that fits you the best. And that's a decision and that you discuss with your doctor, that you discuss with your family, and you make it with several people involved.
Okay, great. All right, Dr. Balar, let's do one more question, and then let's check and see if we get questions from the audience. So won't a new treatment be better than an existing treatment?
That's a great question. I think we always want that the next treatment that we are testing in a clinical trial will be better, but we often don't know that. I do tell my patients that the best treatments in cancer are not from 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and in some instances, not even from 5 years ago. We would like to believe that our best cancer treatments are now based on the science and the technology that we're developing now, but we don't know that for sure. And that's why we do clinical trials, because we have to know for sure, and that's when trials are involved. It's very unlikely that a new treatment will be worse than an existing treatment, but we don't know yet for sure if it's better, and that's why we do the trials.
So are clinical trials typically paid for by health insurance providers? So if you could speak to how a patient can be in a clinical trial, what would their cost be? Maybe a little bit. That would be very beneficial from both sides, from the NCI as well as from the institution side.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can speak from, an academic medical center that's outside of, outside of the government. So it's a private institution. And what I tell my patients and what is outlined specifically in the consent document and what's also in the clinical trial protocol is that what is covered by the clinical trial, which means it's paid for by the sponsor, the funding institution that is supplying funding for the trial, is the experimental treatment itself, whether if it's a new drug, and any treatments or procedures that are specifically research related, which means they're specific for the trial. Unless you were in the trial, you wouldn't be getting these specific evaluations or treatments. And so that is all covered by the clinical trial. However, procedures or evaluations that we would be doing anyway in the course of a patient's care for cancer, those are traditionally billed directly to insurance. And in fact, actually Medicare mandates this. And so things like routine blood draws, routine blood work, imaging assessments to see if the cancer treatment is working or not, the actual infusion of the medication, so the procedure involved in, let's say, placing an IV line or the administration of the drug, those things are things that we would be doing for you anyway, and therefore those things are billed to insurance.
So from the government's perspective, I work at the NCI in Bethesda, Maryland, and we are a very unique institute. There is no other place like that in the world, but we're a research hospital only. So we only run clinical trials and we only see patients in clinical trials. And there is no cost to the patient that are participating in our clinical trials. This is very unique. We're the only place that does this. But if you're in a hospital and it's a normal hospital, then generally the cost for the standard of care, like Dr. Balar said, is covered by your insurance, but the experimental agent is covered by the pharmaceutical company.
There was a question from a participant who mentioned that their doctor had not mentioned clinical trials, and is this something they should be bringing up with their doctor?
Yes, I would say absolutely. Bring it up. Sometimes the doctor isn't aware that there's a clinical trial for this particular setting, and sometimes it takes a little extra work from the patient to look it up, or from the patient's family to look up what's available. BCAN is a great help in this setting, because I know you guys have blogs where patients can talk to each other about clinical trials that are ongoing, or how to get access to a clinical trial. But the sad thing is that there's so many clinical trials, and we need patients, and we don't have enough patients enrolling. And I think it's the patients don't know how to get to the clinical trial. That's a big problem.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there are certain situations where the standard of care treatment is the best choice for an individual patient, but then there are other instances where a clinical trial may be the best choice, even for a patient who's never received any sort of treatment for their cancer. And that discussion really needs to be transparent with the physician. I encourage my patients, that if they ever feel that they want to get a second opinion, other physicians who may see and treat a cancer, that it's always worthwhile to even get a second set of eyes to look at your case. And then lastly, all as Dr. Apolo mentioned, because we have so many trials out there, not all of them are created equal, and some trials may be a better fit for an individual patient compared to others. So it's really important to arm yourself with as much knowledge, not only about your cancer, your diagnosis, but also treatment options that are out there that may include both standard as well as clinical trial treatment.
Okay. Yeah, and I encourage patients always to get a second opinion. I'm a tertiary center, so often patients come to me for second, third, or fourth opinions. But I think it's really important to be informed, and to talk to different doctors treating your particular disease who have access to clinical trials.
If somebody has participated in a clinical trial and they have a favorable response to the treatment that is being evaluated, the trial finishes, will the treatment be able to be continued? How does that patient stay on the treatment if it's indicated that it was working for them? Is there something they need to be able to do?
Well, this is generally predefined in the protocol itself. Most treatments, if it's for metastatic disease, go on indefinitely while the patient is responding as long as they can tolerate it. But some protocols state there will be only 1 year of therapy provided, and not because of financial reasons, but just because we don't know if there's any benefit to giving it for a longer period of time. So this is always predefined in the study itself. So this is something that the patient will be informed at the time that they enroll in the trial.
Okay. Most excellent. And again, it never hurts to ask questions about it. Usually on the trial dashboard, you'll see the PI's contact information. The PI is the primary investigator. They often have a phone number or at least some kind of a contact. You can certainly ask questions about it. And again, bring it up with your doctors. So Rick, would you like to just talk a little bit about this further reading?
Sure. So what you're seeing on the screen is an article that Tony Crispino, which is one of my counterparts, patient advocate, and I co-authored. And if you're interested in understanding about some of the issues that we would work with the researchers on relative to clinical trials, feel free to send me an email. I'd be happy to share this article with you because it talks about how clinical trials are designed and developed from a patient perspective. So feel free to reach out to me using the email address you see on the screen.
Thank you all so much. It was a wonderful program. I'd like to again thank our sponsors, Merck, Genentech, Behring, Incyte, EMD Serono, and Pfizer for their support.